One of the things that you'll notice, especially as you become more of a houseplant enthusiast, is that plants are just not shiny and green-leaved. Some of them have so many different kind of textures and colors. And the episode that I really want to do today is something a little bit more fun and lighthearted, and it's plants fuzzier than your pet. So I once did an article called Plants Fuzzier Than Your Pet, and I think it would be a really good video. So I only highlighted 5 plants in that article, and I have more or less around 20 from my collection here today. Now there are plants that are far fuzzier than the ones that I have here, and there's obviously more with fuzz on them. But I'm only going to highlight the ones that I have in my collection. And there's also 2 more in my bathroom that I'll show in the end as well that I didn't want to take down because they're hanging up. You'll notice that plants develop fuzz for all sorts of different kinds of reasons. And there are, of course, many different theories, some of them that are more tried and tested than others. But plants might develop an actual fuzz around them in order to protect their leaves, sometimes from sunlight, or to protect them from too much water leaving their leaves, especially if in their hotter climates. Some of them actually use the fuzz in order to be able to collect water. So especially if there's mist or fog coming off of a cloudy breeze, they might actually take on some of that water in order to be able to get it through its foliage or to its roots. So plants are developing this kind of morphology of their leaves for a very specific reason. But as a byproduct, it actually gives you a plant that is really fuzzy to touch. So the first ones that I would like to highlight are my Peperomia. And this one is called belly button Peperomia. I never really figured out why. I think maybe because some people have fuzzy belly buttons. But this is called Peperomia verticillata. And there are different cultivars that don't have this kind of fuzziness. But this is actually, I think, more of the species or type variety that has a little fuzzy texture to its leaves and also to its stems. It also has a little bit more of a succulent appeal. And this plant I'm actually growing in my southwest facing window, and it seems to be growing extremely well in that condition. The next one is my Peperomia incana. And incana definitely means like a little bit more grayish hairs. This one, I have to admit, is a little flaccid. So the leaves are flagging a bit because when I picked it up off my shelf, I realized that I hadn't watered it in a little while. So I just gave it a really good drink and it'll perk right back up. But this, as the same way from the Peperomia verticillata, has this kind of like succulent nature. You'll see these succulent stems, you'll see these succulent leaves, and you'll see this kind of whitish, grayish fuzz. And it's like velvet. It's so soft and velvety. Softer than a little kitty. Okay, the next one after that is going to be Stapelia grandiflora. Now, I have a number of stapeliads. These can actually be very challenging to grow because I find that they are really susceptible to mealybugs. Mealybugs are just like attracted to stapeliads. So I have a tendency to kind of grow multiple ones around my house in order to make sure that they don't get under fire from any types of mealybugs. They're also very sensitive to root rot, so you want to make sure that they're in a really well-draining mixture. But this plant is like, it's velveteen. It's so lovely. I think I highlighted this in my 365 days of plants, and you'll have seen me like petting it. It's not one of those plants that looks like it has like a ton of fuzz on it, but when you actually touch it, it's so divine, so divine. Actually, probably as soft as the Peperomia incana. All right, next ones on my list, there's 2 in here that I want to highlight. One is this one in the back called Kalanchoe tomentosa, and tomentose obviously means a little bit more fuzzy, and this is called the panda plant. And for the fuzz and also for its coloration, so it has this kind of brown and white coloration to it. And it actually comes in different kind of varieties or cultivars, so you can get some that are darker than others. But yeah, this one is probably one of the fuzzier ones that I have here. And again, kind of cross between a velveteen and a real fuzz. The next one is a little leggy, and I didn't cut it back. I started to cut back some of my succulent container plantings. And this one I didn't have the heart to cut it back. Actually, its sister in my window is actually flowering now. But this is an Echeveria, Doris Taylor, and it might actually be a cultivar, though I'm not certain off the top of my head, to Echeveria setosa. And I don't have Echeveria setosa in my collection currently, but this one is like Acetosa. It just has this kind of white fuzz. Again, this is a way for the plant to protect itself. So that white fuzz can actually bounce light back up, but also protect the plant so it doesn't transpire as much. And so the water is held on the inside. Much like the Kalanchoe tomentosa, you have other Kalanchoes that have fuzz too. And this is a Kalanchoe beharensis, and this is a tiny version. I've seen some of these growing very, very large, and this one's in my cute little owl planter right here. This one will eventually outgrow this planter. I bought this as a very small 2-inch cutting, and this is going to probably get big in no time, so it will need a little bit more soil to grow. But this one's not as fuzzy as the tomentosa, but it's one that has a very good tactile feel. The next one is Sempervivum arachnoideum. This isn't the fuzziest version of Sempervivum. I think that if you give it a little bit more highlight and you're growing it in really intense conditions, it'll start to get this kind of webby, cobwebby white look. Some of the smaller ones here you'll see have a little bit more cobwebs than the larger versions, but this one, which is also commonly called hens and chicks, has this kind of fuzzy feel to it. Before I get too far into this one's not my best looking plant. I've had to cut it back a number of times, but this is my sillam montana, and you'll see that it has this like white fuzzy nature. It could get very leggy very quickly, so I'm always constantly cutting it back. It probably would want a larger pot than the one that I have it in, and I haven't given it its time, but I'm just being like real with you. But this is a plant that if you get it nice and fresh, is a super fuzzy plant, and again, one that has a little bit more longer velveteen hairs. Okay, next on my list is a weird one. This is called Seyrigia humbertii, and this one you could see has a little bit more of a downy look to it. So it's got this white, almost like padded kind of hairs around it, and it's super soft to the touch, has this like really funky tentacle shape. And I ended up getting into Seyrigias, relatively recently. Not all of them have this kind of fuzzy sheen, but this one is one of my more fuzzier varieties. Similarly to that is this one, which is called cocoon plant. This was formerly known as Senecio haworthii, but it's now known as Caputia tomentosa. And tomentosa, again, means that it has that kind of fuzzy nature to it. This one is funny because it's like the fuzz is like very, very close to the leaves. And so it's super soft to the touch, almost like a cashmere little bunny. This one is quite nice. I find that when growing this in my southwest facing window, if I'm not watering it enough, it'll start to shrivel. So I've since pulled this away, and I grow this further away from my southwest facing window, but still give it bright direct light. Otherwise, these little leaves start to shrivel up, even though I think that this is a plant that is probably amenable to those really highlight conditions. Okay, next on my list is kind of an oddball one. This is Tillandsia tectorum. And you'll see that these little hairs right here are called trichomes. And this is a way for the plant, yes, to be able to bounce light away from it to protect the chlorophyll underneath its leaves. But they also use these little fuzzies in order to be able to attract water and pull water into its foliage. So this is a type of air plant that can handle a little bit more bright light and also watering a little less. So this is the plant that I probably wouldn't soak like the rest of my Tillandsia or air plants. Instead, I would probably end up just recommending just spraying this plant because it has such long trichomes on it. Let's go to begonias next. So this is my Begonia acetosa. And this one, if you look very closely, has this really soft fuzz. This is a lot softer to the touch than you may actually realize. And there are plenty of begonias that have fuzzy leaves. This is just one of the varieties that I'm sharing from my collection. So you might have one that's even fuzzier than this, but I've found that this one is just really wonderful to touch and to play with. Similarly to the same kind of touch, except a little bit more prickly, is the Siderasis fuscata. And you might recognize this plant because I highlighted it as one of the easier plants to grow in my home. And I love the coloration of this, just like the Begonia acetosa with the red on the bottom and the green on top. This one has a little bit more of purplish hairs on the bottom and green on top with a little kind of light greenish silver line down the middle. You can see that this is starting to bud as well, so this is going to be blooming pretty soon. But this is another plant that is just so soft to the touch and a very easy plant to grow. We'll step back and look at this cyanotus. So this is a Cyanotus somaliensis, and this I think is very similar to the Tradescantia sillammontana, but also very similar to this cyanotus, which is starting to get a little dry on top. I could probably take a little bit better care of this. And this is called teddy bear vine. And this one, I don't know if it has a fun name like that, but this one, as you could see, also has these really fine white hairs. And this is a plant that I have growing in a higher light area in a hanging basket. So hence why you could see this has a little hanging basket look like that. And this will eventually start to taper over the sides. These have a habit of getting a little leggy, so you could always kind of cut them back. This is my Gynura, and this one is a little bit of a different form. So I typically don't usually have one that has so wide of leaves. This is one that I picked up from Steve's Leaves, and you could find ones that look a little different. And again, it's not unusual to have plants with like different forms. This one's kind of got like that purple fuzz, very similar to Siderasis fuscata. And again, super velveteen to the touch, will start to trail over, and this plant has a tendency to get kind of nappy and ugly if you let it go too long. So this is a plant that I would recommend constantly cutting back and pruning, just because it could get a little bit too leggy. I was growing Gynura very early on in my houseplant time here in my home, and I eventually got rid of it just because it got too much. But as a small plant, I actually find it to be really amenable. So this is my plants that are in that I brought to my kitchen, but I want to show you two more that are probably fuzzier than your pet. All right, so one of the ones that I want to highlight is my Episcia cupreata, and I actually put this here where my Drimonia used to be, and this is really nice. It's a fuzzy plant. You might not be able to tell from the start, but it just has this really nice low-lying fuzz on its leaves, and it is super fuzzy, and I find these to be very easy plants to grow. If you're not giving them like kind of a moss rock to kind of grow on or anything like that, they can get a little scraggly, but again, not a big deal. You could just kind of cut them back and keep them a little on the bushy side. All right, next one I would say it'd be my Rhipsalis pilocarpa, and this is a type of Rhipsalis that has this kind of fuzzy texture. There's other Rhipsalis that have a little bit of fuzziness, but I think these look a little bit more like tarantula legs and have that long white fuzz that I would include on my list of plants fuzzier than your pet. So guys, those are some of my plants that I'm growing that are fuzzier than your pet. And of course, there may be ones that you are growing in your collection that I don't have here, and you should make those recommendations in the comments below, because I'm sure lots of the viewers will want to find other plants that are nice and fuzzy to touch. Thanks guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
What fuzzy plants are you growing in your home? Share them with others in the comments below. And if you're enjoying these videos, then I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, as it helps others find videos like this. Additionally, we have other ways to support the channel. Consider becoming a sustaining member. It's through your generosity that really helps content like this get made. Or check out our merchandise featuring the Forever Kippy collection. For every 100 items sold, we donate $100 to the Wild Bird Fund, which is the only rehabilitation center in New York City for injured and abandoned birds. More information on homesteadbrooklyn.com.